Everybody, we'll just get started in a moment. We want to just wait till we get the cue that the webcast is underway. Hi.
Dzień dobry. Witam. Dzień dobry, witam.
Filtering in, but whenever you want to start.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I think we'll get started. I want to welcome everyone on behalf of the program on America and the global economy here at the Wilson Center. I want to welcome you to today's event. Also to those of you watching us via our live webcast on the internet for the book launch of Truth, Errors, Lies, and Lies, Politics and Economics in a Volatile World, with our guest, Jigash Kawatko. And I'll have more to say about him and about the book in a moment, but first a little housekeeping. My name is John Molesky. I'm managing editor and host of our dialogue radio and television program here at the Center. And I'm sitting in for page director Kent Hughes, who had to travel to New York today on a bit unexpectedly, and sends his regrets. But we will persevere. I had the opportunity to interview Greg earlier today for our dialogue program and really enjoyed the book and that interview, so I think you're in for a treat today. But before we begin, as I said, I want to tell you a few things about the Wilson Center and about the PAGE program. The Wilson Center, for those of you who don't know, is the nation's living memorial to President Wilson. And Wilson believed that scholars and policymakers are, as he put it, engaged in a common enterprise. And so one of the main characteristics of the center is that we like to offer a meeting place, a forum for people involved in policymaking and in scholarship where they can come together, and for the general public as well, who may not be specialists in either of those realms, but have an interest in an exchange of ideas. The PAGE program, specifically the program on America and the global economy, covers three broad areas: globalization, innovation, and the future of America's economy. And you can see how that could cover a lot of areas by giving ourselves such broad categories within which to work. The PAGE program is also home to two other specific, distinct programs here at the Center: the Global Energy Initiative and a program called Wilson Center on the Hill that sponsors similar meetings and events on Capitol Hill. And I've been asked to put in a plug for PAGE's blog. The PAGE program has a blog, and you can find that at, no punctuation, one giant word, americaandtheglobalEconomy.wordpress.com. So we'd encourage you to check that out. And then for any of the Center's PAGE programming, this webcast, which will be archived and available for you to watch at a later date, just come to the Wilson Center's website at www.wilsoncenter.org. And those of you on the webcast, I don't have to tell you that because you already found it. So let me now introduce you to Greg. Jigash Kawatko is his real name in Polish, but he gives us a break and goes by Greg here in the United States. He may be best known to you and to many around the world as one of the key architects of Poland's economic reforms. He served several times in the government at the highest levels as deputy prime minister and also as finance minister. 4 different times, is that correct?
4 different governments.
4 different governments?
Each one better than the previous one.
Well, that's good. I wish we could always say the same in all democracies. But his resume may begin there for his notoriety, but it hardly ends there. Greg is a true Renaissance man, one of the world's leading thinkers when it comes to big ideas about the economy, but not just about the economy, about things like politics, history, culture, geography, climate, and all these other factors that influence how we think about the global economy and how we try to understand where it's headed. Now, his newest book, Truth, Lies, Errors, Errors and Lies, Politics and Economics in a Volatile World, offers a wide range of provocative, challenging, and important ideas, big ideas. I had the opportunity to interview Greg, as I said earlier, for Dialogue today, and any one of his chapters would be enough to build a program around. And I don't get any percentages from the book, so there's no vested interest in me plugging this to you other than the fact that I really found it a stimulating read. So as far as format today, what we'll do is we'll hand the mic over to Greg, and for the next 20 to 30 minutes, he will entertain you with tales from his book and his theories, after which we'll open it to your questions and comments and hope to have a bit of a discussion. Then following that, you may have noticed on your way in, there is a bookseller on the premises, and if you're so inclined to purchase a book, Greg will be available to sign those for you. So without further ado, Greg Kowatka.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for the invitation and for the introduction. Of course, I will be happy to sign, to dedicate the book to you, to your friends. By somebody who is already familiar with the book, I was advised just to select 1 or 3 topics at the most, and then to focus upon them. But I think that it's virtually impossible because the book is complex, because my reasoning about the word, economy, society, politics, environment, and the feedback between technology and culture, policy and society, environment and economy, culture and economy, and so on, is a very complex one. As I answered today the question while being interviewed by John, somebody has said me that why I don't answer the people the question why it is as it is. First, it seems to me very trivial, a banal question, but then I think it over and over, and I came to the conclusion that actually this is the most difficult question somebody has asked me in my life. And Truth, Error and Lies, Economics and Politics in a Volatile World is the answer given by an interdisciplinary, unorthodox thinking scholar and experienced policymaker and a globetrotter to that simple or complex question. Basically, I'm an economist, but looking for an answer to the driving factors behind durable, equitable, sustainable development, I have come pretty fast to the conclusion that the economics as a science, so us, the economists, we are not able to answer the question which seems to be basically an economic one. It really calls for a complex, eclectic, interdisciplinary approach, because economic growth, distribution of the fruit of the growth, social and economic development depends on non-economic factors, and in the world of the future it will depend on these non-economic factors even more than in the past. My proposition for the future in the book is to go beyond what I refer to as GDP economics and GDP politics. We are living in the world of GDP. Most of the time we measure the success or the failure, including my country, including my tenure in different governments, or the recovery after the recession here in the US and elsewhere. And we are discussing, is it IMF right or wrong with predicting 4.5 or 4.6% of the global gross product increased growth in this year. But this is myopia. This is an approach which is living beyond the field of observation, analysis, and then the conclusions for the shaping the policies for the future. A great deal of human being, individuals, and the groups of the people and the nations, and at the end of the day, the mankind activities. So I'm saying that how we measure, we do act. And as long as we are living within the gorset, within the frame of GDP economy and GDP economics, we are not analyzing the other opportunities to raise the social satisfaction from economic and non-economic activities. For this reason, in a certain part of the book, I'm coming with a proposition to which I refer as integrated index of well-being, where GDP growth or contraction just weights only 0.4 I was invited also by President Sarkozy and Jos Stiglitz to attend this conference recently at French Paris Sorbonne, because once upon a time, as I'm kidding, President Sarkozy came to the office and asked, what is the recent public opinion poll? Well, sir, your support is falling. Why it is falling? GDP is growing. Well, because there are other things than GDP. Then why we are talking all the time about how to raise the GDP? Give me another measure. So being French president, which is a very important country, he invited Jos Stiglitz, Amartya Sen. They invited some distinguished scholars from all over the world. There was the panel which was discussing how to measure, say, economic performance and social progress. I'm coming with my certain proposition idea, which to a certain extent is being taken into consideration here and there. But first things first. First, we have to restructure the train of thought, the aims of economic and development in the long run, which calls also for changing of the values and ideas which are at the top of the priorities. My approach also says, and the conclusion is, that if we want to change the things for better, but what is better, that's also very much disputable, because people have different values. People have different cultures. I'm rather seeing this multicultural as additional factor for development in the long run. I'm rather on the side of the people which believe that the future is a kind of global melting pot rather than a clash of civilization. But if we want to succeed at that turn of civilization, we have to shift the values from having more and more, or as much as possible, to being in a different way. Actually, we are looking for something what we refer in our political thinking in Europe, social cohesion. I'm not a naive. Naiveness is a very bad advice for a scholar, for a thinker. So I don't believe with globalization, with the human face, or global social market economy as successfully it's been developed, for instance, in Scandinavian social democracies. But as you may know from elsewhere, the think tank I created and I'm chairing at Kosminska University is called TIGER, which is the abbreviation for Transformation, Integration, Globalization, Economic Research, TIGER, TIGER. And our slogan is globalization with the human face. There is no tiger with the human face. It's a beautiful animal, but quite a different one. I published one book which is called Tiger with the Human Face, and they found it on the cover in 16th century painting from India, where there is the beast, the tiger, with the human head. But going back to the substance, I think that we must now look for the way to manage the global issues somehow differently than in the past. So by answering the question why it is as it is, I came to the conclusion pretty fast that this is actually the question about the future. Even if people asked the intellectuals, the political leaders, the opinionship leaders in media, how it has happened, who is responsible for the crisis, was it avoidable, how we can get out of all this mess, who will pay the price, who is to be blamed, etc. Actually, the people are asking about the future. They say the past, but they mean the future. So now the question is, what you may say about the future? Is there a way to show the future on scientific ground, or is it just reading the tea leaves, or simply forecasting, exercising, extrapolation, and so on? By the way, extrapolation is one of the most often committed mistakes by the economists and the social scientists, starting from the market analysts to the even to the great philosophers, because the presumption or the assumption is that the process do continue. It used to be like that, it is like that, so therefore it will continue like this, which hardly happens. This is true vis-a-vis the trend on the market, on the financial market. Is it Dow Jones, or is it whatever other index? But that is also true vis-a-vis the mega processes which are of paramount importance for this further course of civilization, mankind, global interdependent economy, and so on. But I think that if one really has a theoretical explanation, how the thing work, what is the mechanism, the causal relation between the cause and the effect, the feedback, which is much more often in the real life than just the simple causal relation, then it must work in the future. Maybe not in 50 years or maybe not in 500 years, but in 5 or 15 years it must work. And therefore it's amazing how short-sighted are some economic thinkers and how weak this theory we rely upon indeed is with showing us the future. As for the future, the longest chapter of the book, chapter number 10, is called Uncertain Future. The only thing which is certain that it is very much uncertain. And then I'm referring to what I call 12 great issues of the future, written in capital letters, great G-I-F, great issues of the future. And that is my basically an economic thinking, and only a couple of them are of strictly economic nature. The limit of economic growth, income inequality, and I'm rather trying to show what are the challenges and what are the chances for the future. My understanding of globalization as an irreversible process is within the frame of definitions that globalization is spontaneous and historical long-lasting process of liberalization and integration which leads to emergence of interdependent global economy. This interdependence is vis-à-vis trade, investment, capital flow, labor, transfer of technology, information, and so on. So there is the interdependent global economy as the result of this process. So if globalization is irreversible, the first biggest challenge of the future is how to govern the global interdependent economy. There is no way to sustain peaceful development of the mankind of 7 billion people in foreseeable future without significant breakthrough vis-à-vis towards global governance. We do have the global economy, we do have the global problems, and we do not have the global policy instruments, and we don't have the global mechanism of coordination of the national or regional policies which will address properly these global challenges. Is it getting out of control mass migration or depletion of non-renewable resources, including the energy means, or is it problem of equitable growth in the global dimension and so on? So when I'm talking about the future, answering the question for myself and for the readers, I'm showing future through double approach. First, the things, that is the events, and the processes which must happen. They are simply unavoidable by the logic of the economic and political mechanism. There is the cause, there is the mechanism, it will happen. We will be in 35, 40 years, 9 billion people, period. It will happen. Well, one may say, okay, unconditionally, if there will be the thermonuclear war, it won't happen. But I'm making an assumption that at least there will be not such a war. So there are other things which must happen because of the objectivity of the law, of the rules of the game, which are, in a sense, natural. And then you have another part of the future, which may happen or may not. But if one is knowledgeable, and one knows the word from theory and from practice, and from attending, from active participation in the issues, as I to a certain extent do, then one knows what depends upon what, and then we have axiology, we have the system of the values. We want something to happen. For instance, we want to avoid, say, getting out of control mass migration, which may cause very many, not only economic, but also social and cultural and political problems. So we have to act properly. The fine art of making, of policy doing, is to act in the right time to avoid the convergence of conflict-prone situation into conflict situation. If we know that the conflict may come, therefore one has to be able to design and execute strategy and policy which will upload the potential for the conflict ex ante when it is not too costly. Otherwise, there is the crisis. For instance, if there is too much of fiscal imbalance or trade imbalance, then the crisis is coming and as a bulldozer is bringing the things somehow under control rather by mitigating, containing the outcome of the negative process than removing the causing factors of that. And then if we want something, for instance, more equitable growth or say avoidance of warming up too much of the climate, we have to act again properly by using the policy means, by using different strategies, by better governing the world of the future. So therefore, complexity, this is one indispensable thing here. Second is interdisciplinary approach. Third is heterodoxy. I don't expect anything significant as far as economic and social thinking in a forcible future, and by forcible future I mean rather 1 or 2 generations than 1 or 2 years, or even 1 or 2 decades from orthodox economic mainstream or another orthodoxy in social thinking. This is the multifaceted world of different cultures, different values, pretty often contradictory ones, and starting from the United States or from Poland or from Russia or from China, Brazil or Egypt, always there is only a heterodox answer, also in the United States. This is the time of cohabitation, or if you prefer French word, cohabitation. You have to learn in the U.S. how to live without cohabitation of the Democrats and the Republicans in a foreseeable future. Maybe this is not yet the challenge for Chinese, but everybody must now learn how to cohabit, respecting the American agenda and the Chinese agenda, because there is not anybody in a position to enforce his or her values upon the other part of interdependent mankind of this 7 billion people. But to come to these propositions about the future, is it security or cultural shift, is it technology or scientific revolution, is it equitable growth or the limits of growth in traditional GDP, meaning and so on, one has to have the theory which is explaining the present. Therefore, the book is a tour de force in 4 dimensions: a spatial dimension, but also time, future, present, and past. But to explain what is going around, why the things are as they are, one has to have the theory. I'm proposing something to which I refer as the coincidence theory of development, pointing to the fact that always important things, events, processes which we study as the sociologists, psychologists, political scientists, economists, anthropologists, etc., they do happen because there is overlapping coincidence at the same time and same space, pretty often the same space. This time means the global interdependent economy. They happen at the same time. The things happen the way they do because many things happen at the same time. And the fine art of pointing to these factors, which are sometimes far away from what the mainstream is looking for, is making the things happen. So this is just lousy to explain the crisis by subprime and the misbehavior of American financial market, as much as this is, of course, myopia to say in our post-communist countries that the sooner we will privatize everything, the better it will be, because the things happen on overlapping of very many other factors. You can bring down the rate of interest down to 0, and money supply is not growing. You can print another billions of dollars. Quantity is in 1, quantity is in 2, and there is not acceleration of inflation because there are other factors which are not fit, which are not put in the traditional mainstream model. Sometimes much more depends on culture than on interest rate or exchange rate, what I'm telling you being the former finance minister. And I do respect very much culture, and I think that the economists, they have the tendency to overseeing the cultural aspects of development, the cultural basis for development. And pretty often there is nothing to be done by manipulating exchange rate or tax rate or interest rate, because what has to be manipulated, quote unquote, these are the values, this is something what is on the cultural side of of development. So that calls for hectic, eclectic, interdisciplinary approach. And then we have to create this post-GDP economics, since we are living in post-GDP economy. How to do it? I'm trying to give some suggestions to share my observation, which is, maybe I shouldn't say unique, but say specific, because I'm W-phase economist. On the one hand, I'm trying to answer the question, how do things happen? That is the normative approach. What are the forces behind? But then on the other hand, I'm trying to come with the propositions how to shape the future of my country, of my European Union, of our civilization, our interdependent global economy in a more sensible way. When they say, and I'm saying so in the book, that this is not the war, this is the quest, but it is also the fight for rationality of globalization. Globalization, as I defined it, is irreversible process. We can be a little bit more patriotic or nationalistic, as I would say. We can impose a little bit of protectionism here and there, being under the influence of the wrong ideology or wrong priorities, or under the influence, the impact of the group of special interest. But this is a irreversible process, the liberalization and integration and creation of an interdependent global economy. But this globalization is hardly rational. Rational is the one who acts, he or she, individual, you and me, you Americans, or we Polish, or we Europeans, or the Chinese, or we mankind. The rational is the one who is acting on his or her behalf, considering the information. And the critical is the quality of information. What is information? Information is the data and the ability to interpret the data in an intelligent way. So at the Wilson Center, we may say you do need theory. But if you are talking with the folks on the Pennsylvania Avenue, don't bore them that they need the theory. Most of the people don't even know what theory implies. But people, they are intelligent enough that they believe that they know what they need, and very often they act in a non-rational way, which has led also to the global financial crisis, which started from this great country. So the question is where the information are coming for, and how the information in the contemporary interdependent world are being manipulated by different ideologies on the one hand, and by different agenda of groups of special interest. What is pushing us from, say, macroeconomics, microeconomics, or narrow economics analysis to the political economy? So the book could be also called, subtitle, Truth, Errors and Lies, the Political Economy of Globalization, for instance, because actually this is the political economy of globalization, but with certain political analysis, cultural anthropology, futurology, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So I don't like this opinion that this is the book about everything, because this is impossible, and I don't think it would be so exciting. But this is definitely the book, the story about interdependence of the globe, of the world, of the mankind, of the civilization, of the global economy, and the links between these great categories, like, for instance, the civilization and the mankind and the global economy. And now the question is, where is global policy? Where is global politics, and what that implies for the future? Because future is exciting, it will be interesting. I also studied very much the past, because to show the future, one needs to have the theory explaining the present. But there is no way to come to the proper theory explaining the present without diving into the past. I'm treating history, which is exciting per se itself, as an instrument to show the future and to advise these which are asking the question how to shape the future for the pubblico globale mondiale bono, I may say, at that time. So there is also the great deal of historical analysis, not only because it is fun, because it is interesting, sometimes exciting, even better than the fiction, but it's very useful for showing the future, why certain things must happen, and how to shape the future to make it a little bit more sensible and more rational from the global viewpoint. Now, at the end, am I optimist or pessimist? I read recently the book, interesting book, The Rational Optimist. Maybe some of you know the book, where after the all analyzes, the author says that he is the rational optimist, and the history teaches us that we were able to overcome all the obstacles, and that will happen again and again. I don't share this argument. It may happen or it may not. To happen, we must know what depends upon what, and it calls for changing not only the policies, the reinstitutionalization of the global economy, but also of certain shift of the values. So the future must be seen within the frame, within the border of a triangle, which is being limited by the values, that is the people's desire, which through motivation are setting the things, including the economic processes in motion, through the institutions in behavioral sense, that is the rules of the game, which must be redesigned and adjusted to the request of the contemporary and future interdependent world economy, and then we have to coordinate the policies in quite a different way, being aware that there is emerging China, that Russia once in the future will be again a superpower, just for this reason that they are the richest country. This is the richest country from the viewpoint of natural resources, and some other regions of the world. This is the world of the future, is the world without a hegemonic power. I'm very much against this extrapolation that first there used to be the Spain, they failed, then it was Britain, they failed, they were overcome by US, now US is losing the ground as the hegemon of the world for a number of reasons to which I'm discussing in the book as well, and now there is coming the age of Asia or the age of China. For sure, the power of China will be growing, and relatively power of US will be on the descending, but the word of the future, this is the multi-pillar word where we must find a better mechanism for economic and political coordination. And here one more time, this is the time for learning ourselves how to run this cohabitation. And to come to the summary, where the title is from, because I did have the problem with the title. Because the True Terrorism Lies, it's not very much a title for an economic book. It may be rather suggesting that this is the psychological book or something like that. I'm not sure where they will put it in Barnes & Noble, in what section. You have to look for the book, so you better get it here. I will be happy to sign it for you. I published 10 years ago with Oxford University Press the book which is called From Shock to Therapy, The Political Economy of Post-Socialist Transformation. And on one occasional lecture visit to Cornell University, I took a look in the library, where is the book, and it was in the section in the Department of Psychiatry. So now they can put it in psychology. But the title is derived from the title of the first chapter, which is called True Terrorism Lies in Politics and Economics, where it is coming from and how to deal with it. So my problem is, and I think this is the problem of each of you, of every thinker, that some other thinkers, with all the due respect, they are not right. And if one is not right in politics or in social sciences, one is facing a very horrible, awful alternative. Either one is wrong, or is mistaken, is committing an error, or one is lying. And I know from my experience, from my observation, from my studies, from my traveling, from myself being in politics and advising here, there, different governments, that pretty often much more the politicians than the economists and the social scientists, which are not right, they are not mistaken, but they are simply lying. So the question is why they are lying, for what reason they are manipulating the public opinion, and why we are teaching the students at certain universities from the textbooks, which actually are hardly from what should be considered an objective science, a true theory, but it's rather an instrument of manipulating the public opinion. For what reason? For the reason that the people believe that they act rationally, acting on their behalf, but they are basing on the information. So what is being transferred to the people as their knowledge pretty often is an instrument for manipulating the people's decision on the behalf of some players at the cost of the others. I think that without going a little bit further into these aspects, it's virtually impossible to understand what's going on in the contemporary world and what will happen in the world of the future. And from this chapter, from this perspective, this chapter must be written, and therefore that's the title with the subtitle Politics and Economics in a Volatile World, because that is what the book is very much about. And the last sentence is that I'm also trying to prove in the book that social sciences and especially economics ought to be as simple as possible, but not simpler. One can't go for too sharp shortcuts, but that's my duty as a man of science, as a scholar, to think in a very model, very scientific, very theoretical way. But to teach, to speak, and to write, one must in as simple, understandable, intelligent language as it is possible, because this is the only way to convince as many people as possible to one's train of thought. So for that reason, the book is written in a hopefully very readable way, but that is to be judged by the readers, and I hope you will enjoy it. And the book is also supported by special internet portal where there is plenty of data, volatileworld.net, and I will be happy to stay in touch with you and answer also the questions you may have later any day, because there is also the blog where the debate continues. This is a never-ending story. It's a fascinating intellectual travel along the times and space, continents, cultures, generations, challenges, and issues. It's a long quest for a track towards better future, which may come, but not necessarily will. But I'm trying to share my knowledge how to make it a little bit more possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. It's interesting that Greg talks about this notion of making it simple without making it too simple, or any more simple than is necessary. There's a book that some of you may be familiar with called Made to Stick. Anyway, it's written by a brother team of university professors, Dan and Chip Heath. And the notion is, what makes an idea sticky? Why do we remember some things? And when I was reading your book, I had some sense that you either were familiar with their concepts or intuitively on your own had come to many of the same conclusions. It's one of the things they talk about, how to make it simple without oversimplifying it. And I think you achieve that in lots of ways, lots of sticky ideas in the book. With that, we'd like to entertain your questions and or comments. And so, sir, do we need a microphone to do this? If everyone will wait, just for the benefit of those people out there in cyberspace who are joining us via the webcast, they won't be able to hear us if you don't have a microphone. So,
Chachin Bethesda Melon. First, thank you for your comment. From the title of your book, that means the word is economy is not idea. And I would like to know that your tiger research have talked about, have you people think about how to reform the world economy? And specifically, now the WTO, the Doha round, cannot get going. And in my sense, is there's dispute of agricultural subsidies between U.S. and EU. And so how to solve this problem. And also from your talk, I mentioned about you talk about U.S. and China, how to get along or together. But in my sense is that either side don't understand the culture or his philosophy or other side. So I think we'll have a constant conflict how to resolve this problem. Thank you.
As for U.S. and China, the only sensible way forward is establishing the institutional framework for permanent cooperation, because any kind of confrontation will be too costly for both partners and for the world. Either the U.S. and China will understand, the sooner the better, they have to cooperate, or we will pay dearly for any conflict, like, for instance, the clash over who is responsible for warming the climate, or the currency war, which seems to be around the corner from certain perspective, or another conflicts about, say, China's expansionism, which is strangely not understand by Western part of the world, yet they did very much the same when they were in need of resources, while they were investing in other countries and so on and so on. How to do it operationally, that's another matter. It's politics. But if Mr. Hu or Mr. Obama, prior to the summit, asked me for their advice, I would say, you guys just established the permanent Sino-American Commission. Not the government of G2, but a permanent commission which must work permanently, addressing the issues which are American and Chinese, and most of the time, because they are American and Chinese, they are global. They are global. For instance, trade balance, for instance, capital flow, for instance, migration, which looks differently from American and differently from American perspective, definitely security, and by all means the pollution, environment, warming, climate, etc. This is the time of a permanent Chinese-American Commission. This is not definitely a time of teaching and preaching, yet we may see the need for certain progress vis-à-vis human rights in China, what was also admitted by Mr. Hu during his recent visit to Washington. I think that there is much more of understanding for the need of this cohabitation and creating of certain structure, institutional framework for addressing the issues on the basis of mutual benefits on both sides, in U.S. and in China. But the politics in U.S. is quite differently exercised, because this is the well-established democracy than it is in China. But any kind of confrontation, any kind of imposing the trade tariffs against Chinese export, or this preaching and teaching, as I'm saying, is not going to work. The same is true vis-à-vis Russia. As for the word, well, to be brief, because we must be brief during the seminar, this is the quest for the global governance. I said already, we have created, or it was created, have we wished or not, during our lifetime of the last generation or two, the interdependent global economy. What happens here depends on what happens elsewhere and is causing something elsewhere. And there is much more understanding of these issues now, even about the people which are not graduates from universities, that the job security in U.S. is depending on competitiveness of labor in Southeast Asia, that our technological advancement in East Central Europe depends on the foreign direct investment, which is the main transfer way of high tech and better technology. Everybody understands that there is kind of interdependence, but we may argue who is more polluting the world, still U.S. or already China, and so on and so on. But these are the issues which must be referred to by the global governance. So now what? Do we need the global government? Do we need the finance minister of the world? Do we need the environment minister of the world? Do we need the president of the world? That would be another utopia. And I'm fed up with utopia. Communist utopia is enough. That's what I refer to as neoliberal utopia, or if you wish, in American political slang, it would rather be contemporary laissez-faire, that the market will do the job. The weaker the government, the less of the regulation, the smaller the taxation. The government is the problem, not the solution. That's another utopia. We have to find the way of the positive synergy between the power of invisible hand of the market, which is now already the global interdependent market, and the visible head or mind of the government, but in the case of the world, of the governance of the world. So how to coordinate that? G20 is a proxy. There are certain issues where it will be just G2. We don't know, but I'm positive that certain secret negotiations, checking and balancing between Washington and Beijing is all time being done. So say there is an effort to coordinate the approach to the issues which are important for China and for US, but with the global implications. But G20 is a step in the right direction. You can point to certain decisions or suggestions by the leaders of the G20 with all the flows. Africa is underrepresented. European Union is there, but there's also France, Britain, Germany, and Italy, which are the members of the European Union. So they are represented somehow, one may say, twice. But this is 85% of the global output. This is 80% of the global population. And if there is the frank, true agreement that we have to do something with bringing the capital flow under control, with bringing the carbon dioxide emission under control, with bringing the migration under control, etc., it works. I'm pointing in the book to the positive side of the processes. I'm living in the world all my life where is the real threat of a nuclear war. And take a look. It's been already for 50, 60 years, and somehow we have avoided it. Doesn't mean that we will avoid it forever. It still may happen. But without the global ministry for defense or war, there was the mechanism, even at the worst of the time of the Cold War, to coordinate, to monitor, and to keep the beast under control. So why it was possible in this case, and why it should be possible vis-à-vis the natural environment, or the financial transfer, or the migration, which will be the great one, if we will be not able to assist, let's say, I'm not saying help, but to assist somehow Africa, which must help herself in the first place, where is 1 billion people, to get out of the poverty. Do you expect millions of people coming to Europe, to North America, etc., and all this problem with Mexicans coming through Rio Grande, or some North Africans coming to Italian islands or Spanish islands, just a kindergarten exercise if we will face the million people counting exodus from the poor countries to the rich countries. So this is the problem, which is the global problem. It's not the problem of poor guys in Africa, how they will meet the ends met. We have to be aware that this is a part of our interdependent common world. So I'm writing a lot about that in this chapter I mentioned already, the uncertain future, the longest chapter of the book number 10, how to ask the question and how to think about a proper conclusion, to design proper institutionalization. But institutionalization, that is the regulation, the set of the rules of the game, enables us to execute certain kind of policies aiming at certain aims for development, but it is only possible if these institutions are subordinated to certain values. And the values differ. They are different in China and the US. They are different in Poland and in Russia. They change a lot. The liberalization is also a irreversible process, the same as, political liberalization, not only the economic one. That is the democratization, not only marketization, as globalization. We may face now we may witness it now, these days, these weeks, these months, these years, in North Africa or pretty soon also some Middle East countries. This is the irreversible process. And we have to take it to our advantage by escaping forward and not trying to go into confrontation or protectionism, etc. The best answer is to sustain, to enforce the process of regional integration. If you want to see the world of the future, say the last decade of the 21st century, not the first, which just was concluded a month ago, how it will look, the world of the end of 21st century will be not divided into 200 national economies. It will consist of dozen or so integrational regional groupings and China, because China is big enough and China does not need to integrate with anybody else. China just integrates with the world. China is big enough market for herself. But from this perspective, you may see the world in 50, 80 years from now consisting from the groupings which somehow can be similar to our European Union. With all the flaws we have in the European Union, we have the problem. We have the problem with management, with the Lisbon Treaty, with so-called constitution. We have the problem with euro, with regional policy. Somebody is already saying that the European Union is doomed, which is completely weird. European Union is success and will be even bigger success. It will deepen the integration. It will enlarge. It will bring more countries. In 20 years, in euro will be over the in euro common currency zone will be more than 30 countries, bar UK. United Kingdom will not join euro, neither in 2 years nor in 20 years, because it's not in the interest of certain British elites. But still, euro will exist and will be stronger and stronger global reserve currency. We have already 27-28% of the global reserves out of 8 trillion US dollars equivalent is being kept in euro.
Okay, who else? Question or comment? Yes, sir. Please wait for the mic. Thank you. Sorry for the inconvenience, but it helps.
On the euro point that you just made,
Yes, please.
There are many people that believe that the euro was prematurely adopted, that there lacks the institutional framework, if you will, the governance. From what I've just heard, you disagree with that proposition and believe that the euro can survive the current crisis and somehow develop the institutional framework. Is that a correct assumption from what I just heard?
The things happen, the way they do, because many things happen at the same time. First, one has to have the imagination. And I'm not saying that the scenario of the failure of euro is completely unrealistic. It may happen. But many things must happen before the euro will collapse. Is it going into this direction? No, it is not. When euro may fail, say, Greece will not make it through. They will not execute a proper fiscal adjustment, and therefore there will be the question what to do. Well, Greece will be excluded from euro, or they will quit for themselves, which will be very costly, but under certain assumptions can be good for this country. I don't think it will be. When euro can fail, only in the way the Soviet Union did fail. As long as Shapoba, Georgia, Shapoba, Estonia were threatening the Soviet Union, we will quit the Union. Who cared? Well, there would be the domino effect. Say, if there was the political declaration of tiny Estonia, we are quitting the Soviet Union. Maybe there would be the military. It would provoke the military action. But the Soviet Union could make it without Lithuania or without Georgia. But when Russia said, we are quitting the Soviet Union, next day Soviet Union ceased to exist. If Germans will say, we are quitting euro, this is the end of the euro. But that will be the more costly for the European Union, and especially for the countries which are now within the European Union, than the recent economic and financial crisis, which was costly enough, and we still pay the price tag in forms of slow economic expansion, big unemployment, and first of all the fiscal crisis, because part of the crisis was shifted from the private sector to the public sector for the reason similar as in the United States, just to avoid the depression, which was in a sense successful policy. So now where the crisis is coming from is what premature. The crisis is coming from, first of all, from moral hazard, from not complying with the rules. The rules had been set, Maastricht criteria, and then the Pact on Further Stabilization and Growth must be observed by each and every member of the Union, including the non-Eurozone members. For instance, we in Poland, we are not the member of Eurozone, unlike the other three post-communist countries, that is Slovenia, Slovakia, and since 1 month Estonia. But we have to observe the principles of the Pact for Stabilization and Growth. So, for instance, the maximum deficit of 3% of GDP, this is the rule. But this is the moral hazard. If it is not taking place in Spain, France, even not in Germany, in the UK, to teach us and preach that we have to behave decently, this is the same like a father who is chain smoker is talking to her son, you don't smoke because this is the bad habit. You quit first and then you tell me what I'm supposed to do. So now there is second wave of debate in Eastern and Western Europe. Is Euro a sensible project? In our case, should we join? In case of some other countries, including Germany and the Netherlands, wasn't it a mistake in the first place? Maybe we should quit, but I'm positive that we will overcome this challenge, which is not that easy. Certain technocratic and operational answer has been delivered already. There are some new vehicles, some new financial instruments, and some money, some capital, which has been supported by the governments and the central banks of the Euro countries. Not everybody is in. For instance, the British or the Polish, they didn't join this European new mechanism because they are not in Euro. So our self-containing approach is why we should now give any money to this vehicle if we are not within the Euro. There are arguments in favor or there are arguments against, but I'm positive. My opinion is Euro is great success story despite the flaws which are in the system. The very big mistake of the enlargement of which we are a part, and I did play a certain role in this process, being at that time, again, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, I had negotiated the financial, economic, trade, investment, final deals with the European Union. That was the mistake. We should join the Euro on the same day when we joined the European Union. It should work differently. So splitting the accession to the European Union with accession to Euro has caused plenty of problems, and now we don't know when countries which lead the show of post-communist transformation like Hungary or Poland will join the Euro. If anybody told me, say 10 years ago, that Estonia will be in the Euro in 2011 and Hungary and Poland will be struggling to be over there in another 5 or 6 years, I would say this is completely weird, that it's not going to happen. The things happen, They were determined to do so. We failed because we could be in Euro already since some time. But now the most important for us is not when, but with what exchange rate. Euro is sensible if one is joining the common currency with the exchange rate which is not securing but giving a chance to sustain the competitiveness of the export-oriented sector. We are small or medium economy. Polish is the biggest one. Estonia is tiny. This is just 1.4 million people. So we must be open. Our strategy for expansion must rely on export-led growth. An exchange rate which is gone at the moment we enter Euro, at least since now there is only the exchange rate of Euro against US dollar or Japanese yen or Chinese yuan, must give the chance for the restructured microeconomic export-oriented sector to sustain the competitiveness. From this perspective, Portugal entered Euro with over-appreciated currency, and this is one of the reasons they have more problems now than, say, some other countries in the region. That was the same case, I believe, with Slovakia, which entered Euro with a little bit over-appreciated crown, which eroded the competitiveness of Slovakia, and this is also a small open economy. They have to rely on export-led growth. But in the longer run, they are the winners. Euro makes the miracles. The biggest flaw, which is not answered yet, theoretically it's very easy to answer. Politically it is next to impossible, that we don't have policy mix. In US you have Fed and you have Treasury. In Poland we have our lovely Independent National Bank of Poland, and we have the love and hate finance minister, whoever he is, and there is the kind of the policy mix, that is the government-led fiscal policy and the central bank-led monetary policy. But in Europe, Kissinger used to joke a generation ago from the defense viewpoint, if you call Europe, whom you call? Because there was not any Kissinger in Europe or any defense minister. So now if Mr. Bernanke calls Europe, he knows that he calls the Frankfurt European Central Bank, Mr. Trichet for the time being. But if he calls the finance minister, Mr. Geithner, there is still nobody to call. European Union budget is 1.04% of the total gross product of the European Union, and the European Parliament did not agree and did not adopt the budget for this year. So we are running 2011 without agreed European Union budget. This is the preliminary budget, which actually is the repetition of the last year. This is how the law works here. So there is not any kind of fiscal consensus. From this perspective, any parallel between US, which is the Union, and the European Union, which is not the Union in American terms of the political words, is a very big difference. In the long run, therefore, we have to harmonize, we have to coordinate the fiscal policies, and that is the very, very long-lasting process and very thorny road, because the national governments will do whatever is possible not to give up the sovereignty of a fiscal policy. They will say, this is our business, and it's not now, it's not this generation. It will take plenty of time, to change the mentality, and maybe in 30 or 50 years, it will be more like a federal fiscal system. I would say more like, say, it is now within Germany than like it is within the United States. But that kind of institutional design which is now is unsustainable. But euro is sustainable, and euro will succeed. To end, when I was Deputy Prime Minister and I was Finance Minister, I had a very small team, just 3 of us. Out of record, even Prime Minister and President didn't know about our underground exercises. And from time to time, I was bringing these 2 of my advisors, and I said, what do we have to screw up to lead the country to the crisis? And we were exercising alternative black scenario. What must happen outside? I don't have anything to say about, say, cross-exchange rate between euro and dollar, or what another calamity must come, and what must go wrong in the country, within the country, that we will be driven into financial crisis or another, say, social crisis, etc. That is eye-opener. If you know how the things must happen at the same time to lead to the crisis, and you are intelligent enough, and then you are committed enough, you may counteract such a scenario. So now the question is, do the European leaders, are they aware how we can bring the euro to the collapse? I think they do, and I think that most of them, they are actually acting on the behalf of saving the euro, and they will succeed. But in the first time, in the first place, these all things should not occur, in the sense that that's another result of policy mistakes and wrong institutions and wrong policies. We were not doomed for that crisis, say, 5 or 10 years ago. The crisis which we have in euro or we have in European Union is not a result of the primary design. That is the result of the policies which were executed in the wrong way afterwards. First of all, not complying with the rules of the Pact of Stabilization and Growth or with the Maastricht criteria.
Don.
Hi, I'm Don Wolfensberger with the Wilson Center here. At the outset of your talk, you were talking a little bit about how we are too fixated on gross national product, gross domestic product. We have to think more in terms of having an index of well-being, for instance. And I've talked with a number of scholars here over the years who are very enamored of that idea, especially they tend to favor what they call social democracy, European social democracy, and basically Sweden. And they like the idea of comparing us to other countries and showing how bad we are in so many respects. And I think the idea, in fact, one of our fellows is writing a book on that. I think a couple of Brits came out last year with a similar book ranking us along others and all sorts of different indices. But I think the idea is to sort of shame us into being more fair with our own people. I'm not sure what the ultimate end is, but to what end do you see such an index being used?
On the global scale, not at all yet. There are certain hints, progresses For instance, for a number of years, we use HDI, Human Development Index by the United Nations Development Program, where GDP is just 1/3, and another third is quality of human capital measured by education, literacy, and school enrollment, and the last third is measured by health, which technically is measured by life expectancy. But if you apply this measure, then you pay attention not only to the material production, how much kilograms, pieces, dollars we produce, you are taking a look how we educate our people or how we educate ourselves, how we take care of healthcare, not by how much money we are spending, but what is the result, how long we are living, presuming that that is the expression of the good health, because it's also a kind of oversimplification. Now there is the new measure which is implemented by the United Nations Development Program, informing much better about the poverty and the progress with fighting poverty. Where the change may come from? Presume that President Obama, in his Union of the State speech, State of the Union speech, was going into this direction. It wouldn't fly. Not now, not in the United States, not with the kind of problems you have as far as the financial, real economy, crisis, etc. is concerned. But go to Europe. In Europe we have a program which is called Europe 2020. And this is the step into right direction without quantification, without any new measure, but pointing to the direction. It says about economic growth, this PhD approach, but it says also about knowledgeable Europe, human capital, and it says also about green Europe, natural environment. And there is also plenty about the instruments, how it's supposed to be done. My advice to President Sarkozy was, you are the president of France, this is the really great country. Because if we will come with something, say, in Latvia or in Slovakia or in Poland, maybe somebody will listen, but I'm afraid that not that much. If Polish president invited Joe Stiglitz and Amartya Sen to propose the new measure for social development and economic performance, I'm not sure that they will accept the invitation. But if French president has extended the invitation, they found it the time. And France is now at the helm of G20. If this initiative did continue and President of France would be committed to what he started, that is the quest for alternative measure of economic performance and social development, being at the helm of G20, using his leverage on international organizations like the World Bank, like the International Monetary Fund, but especially the United Nations system. If that would be supported by President Obama, which I think that would be rather close to his heart, that far away, and British, and if China would join the team, then it would be the beginning of the rethinking what is the aim of development, how we should measure it, and how we're supposed to act. Because, one more time, I said it, how you measure, that is the way how you act. Depends on what we are measuring, that is what we are acting. But this effort has failed. We do have, for instance, Millennium Goals. It's only 4 years to go. They were adopted 11 years ago. Most of them will be missed. Actually, that was the political declaration, but without political commitment. They declared 11 years ago in New York Times, in the wonderful town, then everybody went, and everybody was fighting to stay in power, to be re-elected, etc., etc. There is still lack of this kind of leadership. And only this big country at that stage can change the attitude using the international organizations, the quest for better governance on the interdependent global economy, because otherwise it's good for the seminar room. I just came from a country of Bhutan, one of the poorest country in the world, with one of the most happy people in the world. At the top 10 countries, the most people in the world are the Danes in Denmark, followed by Sweden, Norway, Finland, and there is one poor country, Bhutan. I've been to Bhutan because it's an exciting case. There is a specific mixture which is not to be repeated elsewhere of family values, religion, administration, nature, environment, and so on, so on. But there is the smart policy. There are the values, there are the institutions, and there is the policy. It perfectly fit in my triangle of development, which is quite unique. For instance, they have this Buddhism religion of the Bhutan type, which is completely untransferable neither to the United States, nor to the Muslim countries, nor to Israel or to Poland. So forget it about. Everybody has $1 million view through the window. You cannot have it unless you're living in Iraqis and, say, rather far away from the main track and so on and so on. But they have nice administration. And the most exciting part of it is that the strategy for the development of the country is based on a very complex composite index, which is taking into account different aspects of performance and development, which are not just focused on how much we produce. What is GDP? This is the leisure time. This is the income distribution. This is the traditional culture. These are the family value. This is the satisfaction or lack of satisfaction from the self-administration and so on and so on. And they are using different, it's a very complex system. It's sophisticated. You are amazed that they've come to such the conclusion to Bhutan, but not, for instance, to Canada. They are much more advanced from this perspective than the British or you Americans. And forget about us Polish, where, you know, everything depends now to get rich, to have more, and so on. So greed is not very much in the culture of Bhutanese people. Individualism is neither, which is much more strong, say, in American culture. But we may learn from them, and I think there is a good lesson from this country of Bhutan, how such an index may use. So it calls for intellectual leadership, for political leadership, and then for some kind of the positive pattern. Is it coming from Canada or from Sweden, from Bhutan or from elsewhere? And there is one country, somebody is laughing, somebody is smiling, somebody is not taking it serious, but Mr. Cameron, the not Labour but Tories, so that is a conservative prime minister, as they say, of Great Britain, he said now that GDP is not the most important measure, that we have to take care of happiness. In my country, they say, if our government is going to aim at happiness of the people, we better emigrate right now. Well, maybe yes, maybe they're right, because it looks differently, a different level of development, but Bhutan case shows that you can address the issues of development very differently than within the traditional mainstream approach, even if you are the poor countries, not when you enjoy $50,000 per capita of GDP. But yes, definitely, if we want to save the future for us, if we want to win the future for us and for the next generation, we must shift from to have to be, whatever that implies. I know that that's quite a general statement. And sometime I have started to study this issue. Sometime you are coming to the conclusions which are, well, say, disputable. Recently I have read, and this is a result of research, that, for instance, 1 inch of tall of a man, like we, is an equivalent in U.S. society of $6,000 income per year. So if there is a girl or a lady, and you are asking how satisfied you are as far as your life is concerned, so if a guy is 6'0", and the other one is 6'2" inches, the former one, if he makes $12,000 more per month, she is to the same extent satisfied. So maybe instead, of raising GDP, we have to exercise or to feed, more vitamin A to grow taller. Then I read
make a note to myself to get inserts for my shoes after that.
Yeah, on the high heels, right. Then I read that people enjoy as much, not Facebook, but the real social network, meeting with the friend circle at least one time a month and eating and whining and etc., same as doubling the income, what I hardly believe. But this is somehow showing, that there are very many important things which, yes, the government in their policies should also take care of. But it's a very risky game. That is what I know from elsewhere, because I'm coming from the country where once upon a time the government was trying to make everybody happy by organizing the society. This is rather the third pillar of the better future. That is the private entrepreneurship. There is the smart, socially oriented government, and then there is the non-for-profit civil society. Civil society, which is much stronger, say, in the US or in Scandinavia than in Russia or in Eastern Europe. I think that we have progressed much more during our transition towards market economy, political democracy, than to the building the true social, civil society. But these are the three pillars upon which this well-being must be based into the future. And again, sometimes I don't know how to get from here to there. Then I'm trying to imagine myself how the things will look into the future. I was asked yesterday how Poland will be looking in 40 years. I prefer definitely that kind of question than the question how we look in 4 months, especially since this is another election year. So it will not look that interesting. And sometimes you don't know how we will come to there, but you know how we look. If you will ask me the question, is Kosovo going to be the member of the European Union and the United Nations system? Yes, I'm absolutely positive that they will make it true. But how we will come from here to there, that is not why I'm not absolutely sure how it will happen. But I know that, say, in 20 years, yes, Kosovo will be the full-fledged member of the European Union, there will be Euro, and that will be the member of the United Nations. I'm not sure so much about, say, Abkhazia, even in 20, or North Ossetia, which is a different story. But the time is the solution for each problem. If we don't know what is the solution, then we have to rely on time.
Oh, I think we have time, speaking of time, for one more question or comment. Yes, sir. Hi.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Beeloff from the Woodrow Wilson Center. Before, in the answer that you just gave about how the British Prime Minister is saying that we need a change from GDP onwards, I also read the report from Stiglitz, Shannon, yourself, with France. And I'm wondering if the change, because I know even President Obama has said this, and Merkel also have said this, that we need this change. Do you think it's a little bit of a luxury of the developed countries? Because outside of Bhutan, which is a unique situation, their economy and the whole ideology is very unique, do you think that it is a comfort that we can now think because we've already reached the level of development compared to the developing world? Thank you.
Yes, I think so. I think that it is much more feasible, yet not easy, to shift towards, say, this post-GDP thinking and acting, and to giving more attention, which actually is a fact already. We pay much more attention to environment, to culture. I'm not sure that in the case of US already the leisure time is appreciated as it's supposed to be. But take a microeconomic look. The labor productivity is growing as a result of higher quality of human capital, of our human capital, better technology, better management. Each of us, individually and as the societies, we face the alternative how to share, how to divide the fruits of growing labor productivity. And you, boss, you are making, say, $10,000 per month, and your labor productivity is growing by 10%. And your boss is saying, you know what, I'm raising your salary by $1,000 because your productivity has increased by $1,000. And you are saying to your boss, you know what, you go to the hell with your $1,000. Since now I want to leave my office at 5 p.m., not at 8 p.m., because I prefer 10% more of leisure time than 10% of personal income. What's American response? American response is you want money. You don't want leisure time. You are working much longer than, say, the British. I'm not talking about the Spanish, especially the Italians. You are working 1,850 hours per year, and the Italians are working 1,450. They have 400 more hours of leisure time per year, so they go sooner each day home. They have longer weekends, they have longer vacations, and they are sooner retiring because you can measure the time, the working time, by these 4 different measures. We work in Poland a lot, what means that we pay bigger attention, we give higher priority to the material progress than to other values which are in this well-being concept. And I think that it comes with a certain income. Yet it may happen, and it happens in very less developed countries, that they pay much more leisure time than money income, and they don't want to work too much and too long. This is the cultural difference. And I think that in the rich countries like, say, Western Europe, North America, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, this is just 1 billion, less than 1 billion people, but you produce in these rich countries half of the world output. Now the time is coming where the leisure time will be more appreciated, and sometime it will be enforced. Sometime it will be enforced by the not changing values, but by changing regulation because of changing policy. Simply, people will be forced to work shorter shift because of the need to provide the job opportunities for the others. And there is no risk that we will have this 80-20, that 20% of the labor will be producing enough and 80% of people will be unemployed. Okay, so we will work, for instance, in 20 or so years, instead of 5 days per week, we'll work 4 days, and the weekend will be not 2 days, but will be 3 days. Why not? This is that simple, and this is that complex. Again, this is the matter of these three issues: values, institutions, and policies. You didn't come to this conclusion in U.S. Maybe Mr. Obama has mentioned something, but not yet. But in France, they decided a couple of years ago to cut the working week down to 35 hours, and there was the great political debate: does it make sense or not? But that is the choice. Do I want another 10% of my nominal, of my real salary, or do I want to work 10% less? In 1970, 40 years ago, the annual average working time in U.S. was the same as in G4, that is Britain, France, Italy, and Germany, and the big European economies. And now they work much less. That explains why your GDP per capita is 48,000 and their GDP per capita on purchasing power parity is 36,000. Who is worse? I'm not saying that the Europeans are worse, because they are enjoying the money, less of money, but during more of the leisure time. So we don't have a measure, and we should have the measure. This is the basic measure. We should include in the measurement of the social advancement the valuation of the leisure time. And there is a research upon that. It should be added, it should be included in this well-being index, because otherwise, if the question is who is better, the Americans, because they have 3 times higher income than we have on average in Poland. So you are 3 times better. It depends on very many factors. One of them is the leisure time, another is culture, another is environment, another is the social cohesion, as we called it in our political jargon of Europe, because the term is not that popular in US as it is in Europe.
And with that, I want to, on behalf of Kent Hughes and the program on America and the global economy and the Woodrow Wilson Center, thank you for your attendance, for your attention, and for your participation, and ask you to help me thank our guest, Greg Kalak.
Thank you very much. You know, I'm catching up with the time. I even launched recently my Facebook. This is facebook.com/Kalotko, where you are very much welcome. And do not hesitate to visit my blog and volatileworld.net website, where is plenty of interesting information, also very much about this well-being, how to measure, international comparative analysis, and the discussion club, where people like we, open-minded, progressive, looking for an answer how to run the future for better of all of us, continue the never-ending debate. And as John has said, I will be happy to sign the book for each and every one of you, and if you will have any critical comments, I will appreciate to learn them later on. Anytime you would like to send me a message, I will be happy to get it. So thank you very much for your attendance and for your time. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, John. Thank you, my pleasure.